Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast, the only podcast for dance studio owners, where each week we bring you business growth strategies to help you increase your profits, impact the lives of more students, while ensuring you get back some time to have a little life outside of the studio. It's time for you to become the go-to studio in your area. Now, here's your host, founder of the Dance Studio Owners Association, Clint Salter.
Hey there, dance studio owners. It's Clint here, and welcome to another episode of the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. Today's guest is Josh Patrick, and he's joining us from beautiful Vermont. He's a certified financial planner, a serial entrepreneur, a writer, a reader, and a thinker. He's also a contributor to the New York Times You're the Boss blog, and he's really passionate about helping business owners have an extraordinary life through creating an amazing business. Josh, hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Clint. Thanks so much for having me on your show today.
So, Josh, tell our studio owners a little bit about what you do and how you help your clients.
Well, we have two businesses. One is a traditional wealth management business where we help owners of privately held businesses reach financial independence. And the second one, which is probably we'll spend more of our time talking about today, is what we call Ask Josh Patrick. And the purpose of Ask Josh Patrick is to help private business owners first create a successful business and then move it into personal and economic sustainability.
Our studio owners are like going, yes, I want to know how do I do that? That sounds really good. I love that you live really by the principle of the secret to a great outcome is asking a different question. And I think this is so powerful and we don't think about it really enough. Can you tell us a little bit about that principle? Because for a lot of our studio owners, you know, when I say to them, what do you want? They say, I want more students. You know, so if you were working with a studio owner, how would you kind of address that concept with them?
So the first thing I would do, that's a great thing. We have a process we call the Stage 2 decision-making process, which is how to make decisions strategically. So when a studio owner would say, I want more students, I'll say, okay, if you had more students, what would be different in your life? And they'll answer that question. And then we'll drill down on a why type of question on their answer and keep drilling down till we get to the core reason or the root cause of why they want more students. And then we'll go back and we'll take a look at that what, which is want more students. And we might get a different answer, or we might get the same answer. But if we get a different answer, we know why it's the right answer. Or it's the same answer, we know why it's the right answer. Too often, as soon as we say, I want X, we go to how are we going to get it. We never bother saying, why is this important? And is it really the right thing to do and the most efficient to help us get to the outcome we want? So by asking a different question, what you first need to do is drill down into what your root cause is and then go back and say, is this the right question in the first place to be asking?
Do you generally find that, you know, when someone tells you what they want, so for example, I want more students, when you do that process of drilling down, do you uncover a whole lot of other stuff there?
As a general rule, yes. Typically, what happens is we get to a more elegant solution. You know, when we say more students, well, that's great. But what if we could get the students to pay 20% more and have the same amount? Or what if we could figure out a different value proposition that will allow us to improve our profits without improving the amount of students we have? I mean, if you would ask somebody, why do you want more students? They're going to say, I want to make more money, would be my guess. Yes, that's one way of making more money, but it may not be the most efficient way. So by understanding what's really behind having more students, we can look at all the other things that go into what could help us get to that outcome, and what strategically, and again, the Stage 2 decision process is around making a strategic decision, not a tactical decision.
Talk more about that.
Well, we make hundreds of tactical decisions every single day. And a tactical decision for a dance studio owner might be, do I advertise on Facebook or do I advertise on Pinterest? Or it might be, do I put on a another, we have this need, and do I have to hire another teacher? That's pretty tactical. Strategic would be, what are the things that are going to make my business sing? And most of the time, we just don't have time to think. We might have time to think strategically, but we don't make time to act strategically.
Oh, I like that.
And my experience is business owners are all pretty good at thinking strategically. Almost universally, they're really bad at acting strategically for a whole host of reasons.
And so when you say that, what are the reasons? Like, because I'm thinking in my head, they sit down, they might map something out for 2 hours, so they're thinking, but then when it comes to the implementation and the acting out, there's a disconnect there. So how can we align those two things?
Well, the first thing is you have to carve time off. The fact is, when you say, they'll write things down, in my experience, most business owners don't even have time to write things down. They're so busy with their heads down, working, they never get up and say, how can I do this smarter or more differently? And it really comes down to, I believe, a lack of curiosity. If you're not curious, you're not going to be strategic because you're just going to plow ahead and try to use brute force. Instead of brute force, what if you were to sit and take a step back, go and sit down, have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or whatever, will help you relax, and just think about your business. And first, what is it that you really want out of your business? What's your business going to do for you, and what's it going to do for the people who are important in your life? And I hope some of those important people are your customers.
Yes. Yeah.
So, too often I see business owners, especially when they're not making enough money, really kind of get panicked around not making enough money. And the truth is, how much money you make is a result. It's not the purpose of your business. The purpose of your business is to serve customers, which is a Peter Drucker quote. And Peter Drucker, in my opinion, is the seminal thinker in management. In fact, he may have invented the world of management. So the truth is, all dance studios are there to serve customers, and they're there to serve clients. And by the way, the two are different. For example, in a dance studio, your customer is actually the kids who are in the dance classes. But the client who's making the decision about which dance studio to use, that's not the child. Guess who that is?
That's the parent.
It's the parent, and both have really different needs. And if you're not filling both needs and you don't think about this strategically, you're probably going to have a fair amount of churn in the people who are members of your dance studio. Or at least I would think you would.
Yeah, totally. This is so powerful. Josh, you work with a lot of business owners. I'd love to know, what are some of the common mistakes that you see them making when it comes to them growing their business?
The biggest mistake is they don't know who their best customer is.
And so how do we define who our best customer is, and why do we want to do that?
Well, for me, it's actually pretty easy. The best customer for me is somebody I really like, that fits into my value systems, who is fun to work with, who doesn't complain all the time, has constructive comments when they do want to complain. They are willing to pay what I charge, and they're happy to do so because they get the value out of what they're getting. So first of all, you have to figure out who are your A customers. And then after that, you have to, and this is where the tough part comes in, you have to say, okay, when you say all children are my A customers, well, that means you don't have any A customers, because when you say everybody is my customer, that means nobody is your customer, because nobody can figure out who you are, what you do, what you stand for, or what's different about your studio versus the other studios. One of the things I always ask people to do is say, give me 3 uniques around your business. And they say, what do you mean 3 uniques? And I said, well, if you give me 1 unique, you're going to sound like everybody else. If you give me 2 uniques, you're going to start sounding a little bit different but still sounding like pretty much everybody else. But if you give me 3 uniques, my bet is we can start building a story around what makes you different than all the other dance studios out there in the world.
I love this. It's so pivotal, especially like right now when, you know, there's so many dance studios opening up, and so many of the studios I talk to are saying there's a studio up the road, down the road, upstairs, downstairs. Like how can I stand out? And I think this kind of, you talked before about kind of vision and purpose, and I think it ties into that. Why is it important that we clearly define our vision and purpose? And lots of people talk about it, but how do we go about actually creating it?
Well, we actually have a process. Again, this is a stage 2 value process. You might see there's a theme with all the processes we have. They all start with stage 2. And the reason for that is stage 2 is the strategic part of the business. Stage 1 is the formation, which is all tactical. Stage 2 is strategic, where you make the real money. And stage 3 is transitional, when you try to get out of your business. So the stage 2 process is a strategic process around that. And what you want to do is you have to take your personal values, and there are ways of figuring that out. We do that with our clients. And then how do you take your personal values and move them into your business values? And there's 4 types of values you can have in a business. I stole this from Patrick Lencioni from his book, The Advantage. And I understand there's a Harvard Business Review article that he's written on the same topic. But the 4 types of values are core values, which are the values that actually exist in your company. And those you want to be really mindful of, because that's what you're building your business on. And your core values need to integrate with your personal values. If they don't, you're going to feel burned out pretty quickly. The second type of value are accidental values. These are values that creep into businesses that are just accidentally get there, and nobody knows how that happens. Then there's aspirational values, and the challenge with aspirational values is a lot of business owners take their aspirational values and they try to convince themselves and the world that they're core values. And that's a mistake, because everyone knows it's not true, and you become inauthentic when you try to do that. Now, it's fine to say this is an aspirational value, and here's specifically what we're going to do to make this into a core value, because now you're telling the truth. I'm not there yet. We're on a path, and this is the path we're going to go. And then there's finally permission to play values. And permission to play values is like, integrity is the most important thing in our life. Well, yeah, of course. I'm for, apple pie mom too. And the fact is, for a lot of businesses, integrity is not a core value. It might be a permission to play value, where most of the time they do things that show high integrity, but every once in a while they kind of slip. A core value is 100% of the time you have to present this value, and if you don't present it, you can't be in the company. For example, every company I own, or every company I have a deep relationship with, personal responsibility has got to be a core value. I just can't work with people who want to blame others or justify why things don't work in the world. It doesn't work for me at all. So if you're going to work with me and my company, you're going to have to understand that personal responsibility is a very key thing. And out of that comes, if I'm going to require that you be personally responsible, I have to be tolerant of mistakes you make, and I have to help you learn from those mistakes. That's a piece of what it takes to be personally responsible. You have to put your hand up and say, I screwed up. Here's what I learned. Here's what I'm going to do different in the future. It's not, I screwed up and it was Jack's fault.
Oh my God, this is like so powerful. And I love that you're talking about taking responsibility, because, one of my favorite books is Jack Canfield's The Success Principles. And I think the first thing he talks about, number 1 principle is, take responsibility. And I think I often see in some studio owners that they do point the finger. It is it was them and it was them and it was them. And how do we, maybe if people are identifying themselves as someone who is the finger pointer, is the person that blames everyone else, how can we start shifting that and turning it around?
Well, you have to say, okay, well, maybe it was their fault, but what could I have done differently? Again, as asking yourself a better question. When something goes wrong, you don't want to blame somebody. You don't want to justify, even if it wasn't your fault, because there's not a darn thing you're going to learn from it. If your core belief is mistakes are really bad, you're going to have a hard time being successful, because whether you like it or not, mistakes are going to happen. And it's not that they're going to happen, it's what you're going to do about them. That's important. So if you're, one of my favorite thinkers is a fellow named Buckminster Fuller, who died a long time ago, and he's written a bunch of books. And two of the statements he said I really love is that, one, mistakes are learning opportunities, which is absolutely true. And number two is you don't learn less. So if you think about that, one of the reasons people who are old have wisdom is because they've learned a long time. They've made a lot of mistakes, and hopefully they've learned something from it. And so, I mean, for me, making a mistake is the process of gaining wisdom. And I love to gain wisdom. I think being wise and having wisdom is a pretty cool thing. I'm getting to that age where I've made enough mistakes and I've lived long enough where I have a certain amount of wisdom, maybe not as much as I should, but more than I certainly had when I was 30.
Yeah, totally. I want to kind of circle back, because you talked about accidental values. What are some examples of accidental values? Like, what creeps in that we might not be aware of that impacts us?
Oh, let me think. Say in a dance studio, you have... everybody there has a bunch of body piercings and tattoos. Mm-hmm. So the value might be individual expression would be an accidental value, but it might not be a value in that manner that the customers of the dance studio will feel comfortable in. Mm. So that might be a value you don't want, but it's crept in as a value in your company that you really don't want to have there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get it, understand. I want to shift gears for a second, because I read a great article that you wrote, and it was titled, "Should I Hire My Children?" I'd love to get some of your advice and wisdom for our studio owners, because a lot of them are in family businesses. And so how do we, if we are, like, we've got lots of, association members who are in partnership with their, husband or wife, or their, mother runs the office, it's kind of like a family affair. How do we manage the kind of personal and business side of things?
Well, you actually brought up two kind of different issues. One is working with your spouse or a parent, and the other is hiring your child. If you're, so I'll deal with both as separate issues if we can. Let's start off with children. The one thing you don't want to do if you bring a child into your business is have to fire them because they're not competent. So too often, and this is a fight I have with every client who brings a child into the business, they tend to do it too quickly. If your child has not been successful outside of the family business, why would you ever want to bring him into the family business and then force him on your employees? The business is the goose. You never kill the goose that creates the golden eggs. And if your children are competent, there's a pretty good chance that the goose is going to get killed. Now, this is one of the reasons you see shirt sleeves in 3 generations, which means the first generation builds the wealth, the second generation tries to maintain it, and the third generation spends it all. And this often happens when second generation come in who are not competent to be in the business. So what I like to see families do is put together what I call a family business constitution. And a family business constitution are the rules of the road for a child to join the family business. And there's certain things like you have to create a certain level of education. You have to have a certain level of expertise that you can prove. You have to have worked outside the business and gotten at least one promotion outside of the business before you can join the family business. You can't join the family business at any level higher than you've achieved at an outside job. So in other words, if you've made it up to head janitor at an outside job, you can't come in my company as a sales manager. Those are some things, and and it becomes a conversation with the parents about what they want for their children who join the business. What are the outcomes? We go through the 5 whys, which is drilling down, peeling the onion, and from that we come up with what we call the family business constitution. So that's that side of it. Now, working with family members, specifically spouses, is like working with any partner. I mean, the fact is, if you don't know what each other's values are and you don't make sure you mesh those values, you don't look at the core competencies and learn respect for different core competencies that are brought to the table, then you're going to have a fight instead of having a smooth working machine. If you look at really good companies, there's often an outside person and an inside person that form the business together. Sometimes they're partners, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're family members, sometimes they're not. The businesses that work well, there's a respect between the different people with the different skill sets. The businesses that work poorly is where people start blaming, justifying, pointing fingers and saying, if only they acted more like me, we would be better. No, you wouldn't. You'd be worse because you'd have bigger glaring errors and have giant holes that are missing. Having people with different skill sets allows you to cover all your bases. I'll give you an example. I am the world's worst person at paperwork, and I don't do details well. I just don't. I know how to do them. I can do them. I hate doing them, and if you make me do them for a long time, I'll just stop. So I have people who work in my company who are extraordinarily good at details, and they drive me out of my mind because they want to know what steps should I do first, second, third, and fourth. And my thing is just skip some steps and get there as fast as you can.
Just do it. They're like high in fact finder if we're talking about Kolbe.
Yes. If you're using the Kolbe index, they would typically be high. People who balance me are high in follow through.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm a 9 on quick start, and we've talked about Kolbe before on the podcast. And my project manager is super high in fact finder, and it was a really challenging kind of first 2 months when she joined us because she drove me insane.
Right, and by the way, all Kolbe measures is your energy for different activities. It doesn't tell you this is the type of person you are. If you're high in fact-finding, you have a long fact-finding bar, that means you are going to have lots of energy and you will likely initiate a problem-solving activity by doing research. In your case, you're going to likely initiate a problem-solving activity by throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall and see what sticks. So it's a difference in how much energy we have for activities and a difference in how we were likely to initiate a problem-solving or an opportunity activity. So one of the things, by the way, I am a Kolbe certified person. So it's one of my pet peeves about Kolbe is people use it like DISC or the predictive index, and it's a very different instrument. Very good instrument, and I love it. But it doesn't tell you how you're going to behave. It tells you how much energy you're going to have and how you're likely to initiate.
Oh, I love that. And so I'd like to, can you briefly, there's probably people listening that don't know about Kolbe, and I don't want to get people confused. Can you give us like a 2-second kind of rundown on Kolbe, the test and how we could use it?
Sure. What Kolbe does is that when I hire people, I have 3 things I look at. I have can do, which are technical skills, will do, which are the activities people have to do to be successful, and fit factors, which are the environmental fit, which is a culture thing. So Kolbe actually speaks to what I call will do, which are the activities you need to be successful. So if I'm a bookkeeper, I have to be systematic and do things in an order. So if you're like me, which I have a 9 in quick start, which means I initiate through creative activities, and a 3 in follow through, which means I try to minimize systems and find systems where I can skip steps, is not a good thing for a bookkeeper. You don't want people making it up, and you want people to follow a system. So you're not going to hire me as a bookkeeper, even if I have tons of skills and technical ability, because I'm not going to follow the system, and you're likely to get bad bookkeeping from me. So Kolbe there's 4 things that Kolbe measures. It measures fact finding, which is how much research you're going to do, whether you do a lot of research, you minimize research, you come to solutions, or you're someplace in the middle, which is true for all 4. The next moving over is called follow through, which is how systematic you're going to be. For me, I look at simplifying things, so I'm going to be less systematic than most people, so my systems will have less steps. But I still have, I have respect for systems. I just don't want to do it myself. Then there's quick start, where I'm a 9 and Clint, you're a 9, which means that we probably are bouncing off walls all the time and coming up with like an idea every 35 seconds or so and driving people around us crazy. And then the people who are low in quick start want to stabilize and say, look, enough of the new ideas. Let's get what we have right now working well. And then finally, we get implementer. And if you're like, in the dance business, I'm going to bet that many of your studio owners have a long bar in implementer, which means they do things with their hands and their body. Or if, like me, I have a short bar in implementer, I'm really good at imagining things, but please don't put a screwdriver in my hand. So that's the basic of what Kolbe is. And you remember that whether you have long bars, which means you have lots of energy, or short bars means you have little energy, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you're going to get burned out doing an activity more quickly.
I love it. It's so crucial. I mean, from what you've seen with the businesses that you work with, for those that are a 9, in quick start or are quite high, which a lot of our studio owners actually are, and we've done it with some of our inner circle members, Kolbe, we've got like quite a few 10s as well. I mean, what should we be looking for to hire in our business? Like when we look at Kolbe, like who do we want to actually get the stuff done?
Well, if you're a 9 or a 10 in quick start, I would look for somebody who has lots of energy for systems, which means I would want to have somebody on my team who has a pretty high follow through, because they're going to take the systems and run them. But you have to make sure you stay out of their way and let them run the systems and not come up with new ideas every 12 seconds. Here's a rule I would put in place for all quick starts who have high quick start. It's a rule I developed myself because I broke it all the time. This was back in the early 80s. I would go to seminars, and in the break, I'd be on the phone calling my office telling them to make changes. Well, you can imagine the amount of havoc that would form in our company. So I developed what I call for myself the 2-week rule, which means because I was just screwing things up all the time, it was causing some real problems. I had 90 employees at that time, so you can't do that with 90 employees. So what I did was I would say, okay, cool idea, I'll write it down, I'll put it on a piece of paper, and I'm not going to look at it for 2 weeks. If after 2 weeks, when I get back, it still seems like a good idea, I'll start talking about it with some people. But I don't even mention it to anybody for 2 weeks. And what happens is after 2 weeks, probably 95% of the things I've written down, I say, what did I write that down for? That's really dumb. So I really limit the amount of new things I'm bringing to the party by letting it sit for a while before I start saying, hey, we need to do this. Because when you're the owner of the company and you say we need to do this, guess what people are going to start doing? They're going to either ignore you completely and say, well, this is going to blow over, so why pay any attention? Or they're going to keep changing and they're going to get really frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, this is so... and I can feel like our studio owners listening to this going, that's me. I like walk into I walk into the office and I say to my office manager, like, right, we're going to start these classes, or we're going to do this for a recital or concert, or we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then it doesn't eventuate, or another idea overtakes it, and so it becomes like just this cycle.
Yeah, it's a really frustrating thing to keep doing.
And so, I mean, does it come down to, having focus, having a plan? I mean, because we're always going to have these ideas, right? I mean, I've got a process now for me. I mean, I'm still having lots of ideas, but I've got a process of how I divide them and what I focus on and what I don't, and just like a brain dump of like a whole lot of ideas. I mean, how can we sort that stuff so that we are working on the things that matter?
I am not a big fan of numeric goals. I am a big fan of what I call the goal mapping process. Actually, I don't call it that. There's a guy named Brian Main who's invented a process, he's a Brit, called goal mapping. And goal mapping essentially is, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? Who's going to help you get there? And what specifically or how are you going to do it? So, for example, I might have a goal. My general goal is to live a good and fulfilling life. Okay, what does that mean? So I write down all the things that what that means. Why would it be important for me to do those things I've written down? And I drill down on it. Who am I going to need to help it? Obviously, my wife is one person. My children might be another. Maybe some of the people I work with. Maybe some colleagues I have around the country. And then how? What specifically do I need to do? So if I develop these new ideas, I have to look at my goal map and say, okay, these are new ideas. Do they help me move forward or do they not help me move forward? And again, it comes down to asking yourself a better question. By the way, everything in the world seems to come down to, are you asking yourself a better question?
How do we know if the question we're asking is a good one to be asking?
Does it get you the results you want? I guess that would be the answer for that.
And so I think it's a bit of test and measure, right? Like kind of looking at, the questions we've asked ourselves and where we've gotten to, and then kind of, tweaking it and refining it.
I would say that's true. And I also would say that if it's not a why question, then you're likely not asking a good question. A why question is, what difference will this make in my life? How will this make my life better? Could this make my life worse? If I was to do this, what would happen? Asking with the word why, I often say don't do that. And there's a reason behind it. The question why is a left brain question. The question how would this make my life different is a whole brain question, because it takes both spatial and specificity to get that question answered properly, versus why is, well, it's a good thing for me to do. Okay, but why is that true? I need more money. Well, why is that true? But if I ask, how would this make my life different? I say, well, let me see. I might not have to work as hard. Okay, well, if you don't work as hard, what difference does that make in your life? And for some people, they'll have a really great answer. And some people say, not much. So you can stop right there and move on to something else.
So good. Josh, I could talk to you for such a long time, but I know we're out of time. Do you want to leave us with like a golden nugget? What do you think that our studio owners need to hear from you?
The most powerful question I think you can ask is, what would happen if? So when you're thinking about something, if you say to yourself, what would happen if this was true, or what would happen if this was false, you're going to get some really interesting answers, which will hopefully disturb you enough to actually take action.
Oh, I love it. I'm writing it on my Post-it note. I'm gonna put that one right in front of my computer today. I love that. Josh, I'm sure our studio owners will want to know more about you. How do they get in touch? Where can we go?
Well, the first thing I do is I've done a 1-hour audio CD, which is called Success to Sustainability. And it talks about the 5 things a business owner needs to do to become sustainable. It's a physical audio CD, which I'll send to you, and it's free. And to get it is really pretty easy. Just text the word sustainable to 44222, and that'll take you to our sign-up page where you can give us your address, and we'll mail our CD out to you. That's one thing you can do. My email address is jpatrick, the letter J, Patrick, at askjoshpatrick.com. We have 2 websites you can find us at. One is www.askjoshpatrick.com, and the other is www.stage2, that's the number 2, planning.com. Ask Josh Patrick is our site for where we do consulting, coaching, and mentoring. And the Stage 2 planning site is the one that's our wealth management business. So there's lots of ways to find me, and I do answer emails.
I love it. Awesome. Great. Look, Josh, really appreciate your time today. So valuable. I mean, guys, this is super good. I mean, I've been sitting here going, taking notes. I'm sure you've taken plenty of notes as well that you can really implement into your life as the CEO of your dance studio. Thanks, Josh. It's been awesome.
Well, thanks a lot, Clint. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for joining us today. For all the resource links from the show and to receive access to our free dance studio growth training, make sure you visit transformmydancestudio.com.